All right, welcome back to the Outdoor Adventures podcast. Today I'm in studio remotely with Christie Green, author of Moonlight Elk. Thank you, Christie, for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you. What an honor to be invited. And thank you for taking time to read Moonlight Elk.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I told you this before we got started, but I really feel like I know you after reading your book because you tell so many personal stories and you connect all these outdoor pieces together. And I don't know how to describe your writing style, but I feel like, and you tell me if this is not the appropriate wording, but it's almost like there's some prose in what you're writing. Like it's very poetic, is what I'm trying to say, and how you connect everything together. Would you describe that as accurate?
I mean, I guess so. Yeah, some people have called it poetic or lyric. I always thought or consider myself just like a creative nonfiction writer. And then in anything I write, whether I'm writing an article for a magazine or writing this book or the next book, what happens is there's some other voice or some other way that takes over. Because in some ways, I'm a very utilitarian, practical person. And I'm also, I guess I would say, artistic in a lot of ways. So I think that the writing and the books are kind of that a reflection of that blending or that hybridizing of science and story. So sometimes, like, I don't know, it reminds me of like when I'm hunting. I don't know if this is true for you, but like I'll start out on the hunt and then after about an hour, I cross over into like this other world. And I'm less human and less in the straight line world and more in the sensory world and the animal world and the plants and the river or whatever. And something else takes over that doesn't quite feel like human logic. It's more like a body sensing. So that's what happens with the writing too. Something takes over. Like I know there's data I want to incorporate or the actual happenings of whatever the event or the story is I'm trying to tell, but something else takes over that is, I think, deeper. That's like, yeah, more on the like the sensual or visceral side.
Yeah, and that definitely resonated for me when I was reading it. It was like, do you think that that part of that first hour is a decompression time from your normal life? Do you think it's getting that human society and that human busy, busy, busy out? Or do you think it's just how we should always be?
I wish. I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like when I cross over and I'm in that zone, I do feel like that's my truest self. That's the person, the being. I guess, and I would say, I know this sounds maybe some cliche or cheesy, but it is like the animal self. My animal self gets to surface, emerge, and be the guide more than the rational human, the human that thinks that she's in control or knows something or can follow, even a map or a schedule or a clock. Because so much of our time in our lives is oriented around those things that we think we know, right? And how we fit in and plug ourselves in and program our days around these things. So being, and as I like to say, earthling, being an earthling on the earth, moving in a way that's unobstructed and is not defined by pavement or sidewalks or traffic lights or clocks. I do think that's who we are. I think we all have that inside, and it's a matter of what brings us back to that place and that being that's real. It's like our authentic selves. And for me, that's being out with animals. Writing and hunting are sort of parallel practices for me where I get to remember who I am. And it is shedding the skins, I think, of reason, of human life, daily life, all the responsibilities we have. But it usually takes me about an hour to kind of, and then hopefully I have multiple days because the more days, and also I don't know if you feel this way hunting, but starting before daylight and ending after daylight, there's something so powerful about moving in darkness, right?
Mhm.
That is also a way that's less familiar. Like we're not that often out in the darkness without other humans around, where we're just attuning to our senses in that way, and having to have kind of a heightened awareness because of darkness. There's something about that too, multiple days in a row over any given hunt where I really get to. yeah, it's like surrendering to the animal. And it's really hard to come back. Every time it's
Yeah.
so hard to come back.
It's like sensory overload. You go into that first, because in your mind, you're not having the comforts of home. So you're not eating the same as you would eat at home. You're not sleeping the same as you would sleep at home. And so then oftentimes on your way back from a hunt, you go into, let's even say you stop for gas and you go into a mini mart to get a coffee or a snack or whatever it is. Everybody seems so noisy and so in your face, and I'm usually looking a little disheveled and I haven't showered in a while or whatever, but I almost can't even connect with that world once I get out of the other world. I come in there and I'm just like, could you be quiet? Could you stop cutting me off? Like, why is everyone in a hurry? Like
Yeah,
your brain is trying to process where you came from to where you are, and it's a bizarre feeling,
it
I think.
is. The transitions are hard. And I feel exactly the same way. I go, like, even being on pavement and going that fast after being
Mm,
on the ground or on a two track, moving very slowly. And then the lights, everything is so bright, like you say, and loud. And I think it's fascinating to me that we as a culture, at least Western culture, have somehow agreed that this is what normal is.
yeah.
That how we spend time, how we've organized things, our pace, that's more normal than walking the land or harvesting our food from the land too. There are a lot of strong feelings, as you know, around hunting, around killing animals, even eating meat. And and I respect all of those. And it's interesting to me that in contemporary culture, that there is such pushback around that way of life when actually we've been that way longer than we haven't as a species. That doesn't mean, of course, we're changing and adapting to current cultural context, and it's not for everybody, but it's that somehow some people believe that it's that totally foreign, that we're that far away from where we should be. Anyway, that's a different subject, but yeah,
Oh,
it is a good opportunity and a good way to look at who we are as a culture. And hunting for me, like you say, is it's this wonderful opportunity to feel the contrast.
yeah, and I'm not a trophy hunter. I'm not out there for a trophy, but I do have a my first buck that, I was a 17-year-old kid and I've got him on my wall here in my office. I'm at my in the studio, which is down the hall from my office, but and I and I don't have anything against people that want to have taxidermy or whatever, but it at the time it was something I wanted to do, but I look at him and it brings back all these memories of that um, experience that I had with my dad and my brother and some other relatives, and occasionally I'll have a client that's offended by it, and they'll come in and they'll be offended by, this deer on my wall. And I usually the first question I ask is, well, do you eat meat? And, oh yeah, of course we eat meat, but we prefer to get it from a package in a grocery store.
Yeah.
And I call him George is his name, and I say, well, George had a much better life than I guarantee you all the things that you're eating in the grocery store. And for me, it was just part of my childhood and how I was raised. And I really do enjoy the meat. I don't enjoy taking the life of an animal. You know, and I don't want to talk bad about anyone in the taxidermy, because I think most of us as hunters, we do see beauty in those animals and we like to kind of decorate our homes with antlers, or people that get full mounts or whatever. I don't have an issue with it. It's not something that I will probably do going forward. That was the only time that I've done it. Um, but I also don't have any objection to it, I guess. And I wasn't trying to go down that we could go a million different directions here, but my point is, like, well, hunting for us is more than how people see it from the outside, I think, a lot of times. And we talk about that a lot on this show, but it's also your perspective as a female in the hunting space is an interesting one, because I really liked in your book where you talked about the first time you went out on your own and how, like, this was your hunt and your plan, and you weren't listening to another person's input on how you were going to do it and how it was going to go about. And even when you were out there, you encountered some people that were like trying to tell you how to do it, and you're like, no, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to do it my way.
Mhm.
I really liked the thing that about your book is you're a really good storyteller. You know, you're very
Oh,
good at like putting people, for me, especially as a hunter, I could, the way you describe things, I could go on that journey with you when you were describing the morning and how you're getting to different locations and branches breaking and things like that. And then even how you described like processing of the animal. Um, that was the most enjoyable part for me. I mean, there's lots of components that I liked, but that was something, the storytelling aspect, and like and I think as a non-hunter, they could walk that journey with you too. It's written in a way that someone that isn't a hunter could also go there. So
yeah. That's what I
was
remember when the New Mexico Press, as you know, is the publisher, and when they first got a hold of the book, I was really surprised and pleased that my editor and the head of marketing and most of the team, if not all of the team at the press, said, this is not a hunting book. And this is not a book for hunters or only for hunters. And I said, that's right. It wasn't, it's asking a lot of questions and sharing my own questions and experiences about my relationship to place, to animals, to myself, to men, to hunting itself through the lens of hunting. But it's about so much more than that. And like you say, I've been really interested in the readers that reach out to me, and a lot of them aren't hunters. There are a lot of women readers. I love to have the men readers as well, hunters, non-hunters. Of course, I have no preference, but it is appealing to people in different ways. I did a podcast with the Wild Sovereign out of the UK, and the woman, Leanne, who interviewed me, she's a vegan. She's never once eaten meat in her life.
Mhm.
And she read the book, and we had this amazing conversation. And who knew? Who knew that the chords that it's striking with people for different reasons. And a lot of it does, like you say, have to do with our relationship to food and the industry, food industry, and how we perceive what we eat and how we make choices around that. So that's another theme, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, and nothing's off limits here. We can talk about anything we want to talk about. But I would say that when, as a reader, when you're going, you kind of go through this journey with you as you're describing these different, and you go in different timelines of your life, and you're telling us aspects of your life, and you're kind of correlating it to things that you're experiencing in the field, and different memories are being jogged for you in the book is the style, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great read. I wish that we would have talked when this is my fault, not yours, but right after I finished it so that I'd have more like direct excerpts that I could
Um,
kind of point to. But because Christy, I don't know you, but you're a very gracious person. Like, so she is, just for those listening, like, I got really sick for quite a while, and then I don't like to do a podcast when I'm sick because my voice is all not good, and so we had to delay this quite a bit. And even today, you were gracious because I had to push this out a little way. So, and I think that and I don't want to say who you are because that's not my place to say that, but I would say that you come across in the book with how you have been with me in real life too. Like there's this gracious side to you that's, but also just you like a seek to understand type of personality. I don't know if I'm describing you well, but that's just how you come across.
mm.
So,
Well, that's generous. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that's the other thing too. Some people would say, or like marketing people, or the people would say, well, now you're an expert and people are going to come to you as that. And I said, I'm actually quite the opposite. And I didn't, the, the writing of the book and the stories were in some ways accidental. They were a product of the hunt, like coming back and having this experience and these powerful feelings and responses, and just kind of wanting to metabolize them for myself. So articulating them on the page, and then they came together. It was literally a dream back in 2017 that said, you must write to save your life the way that
mm,
elk run up the hill to save theirs. And gave me the dream, gave me the name of my now developmental editor slash story midwife, Christian Leahy, and said, go to Christian. And I did. And I had the stack of stories. I said, what should we do with these? Is this worth anything? And fast forward, however many years, it's been almost 10 years. Here we have a book, but they're all more of an exploration. It's not like, I'm not saying I'm an expert, or I'm not saying that I know what I'm doing is right, or I'm certainly not saying what anybody else should do. And I feel like I'm 55 years old, and I feel like now the older I get, the softer I get. And actually hunting, surprisingly, has made me softer. This intimacy with the animals and, cutting open their bodies and processing them. And like you say, that really excruciating choice to pull a trigger and make the kill is hard, and it's harder and harder. So I feel like it's interesting. The older I get, or the more experience I have with the animals, maybe I'm getting a little more compassionate with myself and hopefully more compassionate with other people, because for a lot of my life, I was not gracious like you're describing. I was really a hard ass and kind of intolerant and critical.
Mm,
And I'm I'm trying to soften that. I think that had to do with productivity, performance, like trying to prove something, like always,
yeah.
maybe as a woman, but also I come from a very industrious family, right? Um, but I think that was something, I explore that. There's that arc in the book where after learning to hunt from Al, my then partner, and then choosing to go on my own, as a woman, I was like, okay, I want to know if I can do this. I want to prove to myself that I can do it, that I can hunt, that I can go through all of it by myself. And then the more I was doing that, the more I realized I don't have to prove anything. And when I could let that go and just be wholly present, because like I say in the book, I forget which story it's in, but if I'm proving or comparing myself to the men or to anybody, it could be in any, my profession as a landscape architect or whatever, that I'm still adhering to somebody else's rule or somebody else's model. And so how can any or all of us shed that comparing mind and just be who we are and
Mhm.
not have to prove? And what does that feel like? It's a much, for me, the feeling in the moment in my days is much better. And when I'm hunting without trying to prove, I feel better. So maybe that's what I'm trying to bring forward. I don't want to be a, yeah, I don't, we have enough of that in our world.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
You want to be the most authentic version of yourself is how, paraphrasing that a little bit, because I've gotten that way. I'm 46, and the longer that I've hunted, the less I want to pull the actual trigger. I mean, I still enjoy eating venison. I eat venison probably at least once or twice a week. And so I can't seem to find an equivalent replacement to that in my diet that I enjoy as much and I feel as good from. So I know that hunting will always be a part of my life, but I do think you do soften the older you get, and it is, and where I live, I have deer and I see the fawns, and you get used to watching them grow, and I think hunters appreciate the beauty of animals probably more than almost anyone else because we've observed them in different situations too, and so it is this weird balance of, and for me, back to the whole trophy hunter thing, a lot of hunters will compare that, well, that one was bigger than that one. And you do necessarily, I want to harvest a mature animal that's going to give me the most amount of meat but I also am in there to do an ethical kill and to put meat in my freezer. So I'm not one of those that's going to measure myself on anybody else. And the older you get, the less that matters to you, I guess. And it's a maturity almost in the space that I'm out there to be in nature. If I get the opportunity to come home with meat, then that's a blessing for my family and a way to provide food and also fulfilling the purpose that I'm out there for. But there's also a lot of times where you're not successful and those hunts are just as memorable and you still have these memories that come from those experiences. So,
For sure. And I don't know, I'd be curious, to hear from you, and also just curious with your listeners. Like, for me, more lately on hunts, I'll make a conscious choice not to pull the trigger. I've just
mhm.
noticed that. And I actually thought recently, should I be hunting with a camera? You know?
Yeah,
But at
yeah.
the same time, there's something so powerful and meaningful about the process of um, taking the animal's whole body and making that body into meat. And then, like you say, like a lot of the animals I've hunted, their turkey feet all over, their turkey skulls, their feathers, skins, bones hanging from the portal. I'm looking at a bull elk. His whole skeleton is hanging outside right now from a hunt from 2 years ago, because again, like you, they're not trophies, they're stories and their
Mhm.
experiences. And each one of these animals is an individual being that I knew for a very short amount of time, or can't say I knew, but I experienced for a very short amount of time. And they're here. And it's a way of prolonging the reverence, I guess, in this
Mhm.
form, as well as like taking that body into my body. It's like communion. It is. It's like holy communion is what I feel
Mhm.
with that world. And so there's a part of me on one hand, it's a contradiction. I don't want to kill, but I do want the whole all of that experience. There's nothing like it. It's the most profound experience and profound relationship in my life, really. Well, except for or in addition to being a mother, I guess.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's a beauty, I think a beauty in them. I find beauty in antlers and beauty in fur and all the components that are in that animal to me are beautiful. I mean, there was a period of time where I worked for the Forest Service and I would collect jawbones of elk that we would find out in the woods and I would put all the teeth in like a cottage cheese container. I ended up selling them at a garage sale years later, but at the time in my life, I thought they were cool, and I just thought they were neat to find and they were just sitting there, so I would take them.
Yeah.
And that may be bizarre to some people, but it's just, I don't know. It's we all walk through nature in different ways. Um, when did you start hunting? When was it? I mean, was it because you hunted obviously with Al, who you talk about in the book as well, and then on your own off, at a different time. But did you have any hunting experience as a younger person, like in your youth growing up?
Not really. I grew up in Alaska and then also spent summers on my grandfather's farm in West Texas. And so it wasn't like actual hunting. This was, I mean, to tell you the truth, we were out. I think about it now and I'm horrified, as a kid, and we'd go out and, hunt jackrabbits in the evening or something, or hunt squirrels. And there wasn't like a consciousness around it. It was frivolous and I'm not particularly proud of it. And then in my college years, I worked at a hunting lodge in Alaska for a couple of years out at the Stony River, west of the Alaska Range. And I didn't hunt then, but I was supporting fishers and hunters, and we did the processing of the moose and the caribou and bear and Dall sheep, and so butchering and fleshing the hides and cooking. So I remember that experience as being really powerful because I would witness the hunters coming in and watch most of them except for one, this one from Germany. He took part in all of the processing of the caribou and moose that he shot. And
Mm.
he had this ritualistic kind of celebration. We ate the tongue, the heart, the liver, all of it. He scraped the brains and processed the skulls. But most of the hunters came, shot what they were after, posed with the animal, and then had nothing to do with the animal, with the meat or the processing. And they would come take pictures of us in the fleshing shed and in a way almost be grossed out. And then we would send the cape to the taxidermist and we would take the meat home. So I remember feeling this kind of like curiosity and disgust, actually, to be honest,
Mhm.
with that way. It just felt so it was like strictly about um I guess trophy or some sort of taking or thinking, or I see it as power, like some form of
Mhm.
power over. But anyway, fast forward then, I didn't hunt until I was 40, so it's only been like 15, 16 years. And I'm a landscape architect and my niche is edible landscapes, edible and native plant landscapes. And I have a garden and I grow my own food and was growing food for clients. And I thought, well, if I'm growing all these vegetables and fruit, why not try to harvest my own meat? And that's when I met Al, and been a lifelong hunter. He's from North Dakota. And I asked him to take me, and he, very generously said yes. Little did I know that that first elk hunt, I mean, literally changed my life. I can't even hardly remember who I was before I hunted,
Mm.
and also there are some drawbacks and advantages to starting at 40.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if I had started when I was younger, just like if you learn a foreign language when you're younger, it's so much easier. So I'm a kind of clumsy, awkward beginner trying to find my way. And I keep learning. It's endless. I hope I get
Mhm.
to hunt the rest of my life. And I don't know how I'll choose to do it, but yeah, it's a huge part of who I am.
Yeah, and we start to get some physical limitations as well. I mean, I was preparing for an Idaho hunt a while back and started, trying to get in shape for that. But no matter how good of gym shape you get into, until you get out in the woods, it's a totally different game, with the elevation gains and some of the stuff that you have to do. You'll challenge your body like nothing else, that's for sure. So,
Mm,
at least for
that's
me.
true. No, me too.
But
I've thought about that too. What if I'm less able as I get older, so I try to stay in shape. But like you say, yeah, you put the pack on and go straight up, it's a whole different deal and different weather or whatever. Like
yeah, and
definitely
I'm not
not.
one of those blessed individuals because there is a few that I've hunted with or that I know that are my clients that also hunt where they do nothing to prepare, but it's like they become superhuman when they get in the woods and they can just, you look at them and you don't see any of the physical attributes that would equate to that, but they will go up and down, all around, all day long. Yeah, they get out of breath just like anybody does, but they can just keep going. And it's
Mhm.
it's an amazing mental resilience when the physical doesn't make sense and they still keep going and going because they just love the pursuit enough to drive them. And
Yeah.
for me, I enjoy that as well, but I have to put in some prep time or I'm going to be climbing that first hill going, what did you do? Why are you here? I'll
Mhm.
have those thoughts running in my head like you're
Yeah.
underprepared. So I
Yeah.
have to put a little bit of time in. So,
Yeah. Well, and it's also true. I'm guessing for you, like it's amazing what kicks in. This is part of what I love about the hunt too, is that instinct and adrenaline that kick in where thankfully this logical mind or the sedentary office body or whatever
mhm.
takes a back seat and we do become fully animalized in a way and we do what we do. We just know what to do in the moment. Those split-second decisions or lay down or go over here really fast or run or whatever it is. And it's a how it is when you're hunting, nothing happens most of the time. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, everything happens all at once and you got to do something. And we do, and sometimes it all comes together and sometimes it doesn't. But it's amazing. I guess what I'm getting at is it's amazing to me what I'm learning is embodied, like the embodied wisdom that is in there. It's in my physical body somehow. And there is this mind body connection that I
Mhm.
don't get to um, apply anywhere else like I do when I'm hunting. And that is something that I'm very grateful for because, like we were talking about earlier, then I feel like my most authentic self and I feel like my most earthly self. Like we are actually earthlings, even if we are sitting in a house or working, we are not apart from nature. And that is in us and it has been us. And to be able to remember that in the ways we do, however we do, whether it's through going on a hike or, you know, um, skinning an animal or whatever, it's there within us. I just believe it. I believe it is.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So as far as my brain went blank for a second there. I had a question lined up for you, and then I was listening to what you're saying so intently that I lost it. But I was gonna let me see if it comes back to me.
Mhm.
Uh, this is another part about getting older that's not great. I do this
Yeah.
a lot. I'll talk to my cousins on the phone, and I'll be like about ready to tell them something, and then it's gone. And
Poof,
I
it's
can't
gone.
remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, it might be gone.
that's
It'll
okay.
come back to me as we go along, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But I would say, do you have you just got back from Alaska?
Mhm.
And is that a meat gathering experience or is there, oh, but this was preparing for the red runs on the Kenai. And so
Yeah. Mhm.
is that something that brings some of that to you or is this more of a utilitarian experience when you're in Alaska?
Oh, yeah, well, like I said, I was raised there, and then I've been going back more regularly for the last, what, 6 years or so, because I just finished writing the manuscript for the second book, which is called Salmon Dreaming, Coming Home to Alaska. So
Oh,
I've spent quite a bit of time up there lately, all different seasons. Last year I was there all summer. Um, And so a lot of it was kind of that ear to the ground, nose to the ground, experiential, immersive listening and research, because I'm looking at how we define, find, and make home, and how we navigate as humans, and how we navigate and find our way compared to how the salmon find their way. And
Mm.
so the book looks at the physiological features of salmon, their lateral line, the otolith, the nostril, the eye, everything, how they navigate the genius and wisdom of their bodies compared to how we navigate, with my stepfather as the example, or as a human example, because he was a geologist in Alaska in the middle of the 20th century. And he made a lot of the original maps of parts of Alaska. So kind of looking at the scientific, device centric, because we use external devices as humans, right, to find our way, compared to the embodied way of the salmon. And the book takes place on the Kenai watershed, because that's where I grew up. Not, I grew up in Anchorage, but we grew up fishing on the Kenai.
Mm.
So it was my own returning home to that watershed and that place as an adult, and looking at, how do I experience it now as a grown woman, as a mother? How did I experience it then? And so even now, fishing for salmon, it all feels different than when I was a kid, right? The things that I did as a kid, I just took for granted. I wasn't thinking about in the same way. So it's like going away and then coming back. So long answer to your question, going to Alaska lately has been a large part of about writing the manuscript. But then also my brother and I have some land in Kenai. And so we are spending time there. So I just went to get it set up. So it's my soul home. So I'm home when I'm there. I feel like my best self when I'm there. I love it. I step off the plane, I smell it. It feels like childhood. And it is also, catching salmon and canning salmon and freezing salmon and having that amazing source of the most beautiful food, to
Right.
share. So it's also harvesting. Yeah, it's both.
Yeah. Well, that was well said, and it jogged my foggy brain. So what I was going to ask you, this burning question that probably not that burning now, but is how did you come from having these experiences to decide to write about them? And did it start with just journaling in your own journals, and then or was it just did you feel this like compulsion to have to put these experiences on a page? And obviously, that new book sounds like it's going to be fantastic already. That little info that you've shared with us. And as we started the conversation, you probably don't have a timeline on it. It's going to be when it comes together, or do you have a timeline on the new book? So that's a
No,
couple questions there.
yeah, Salmon Dreaming is supposed to come out next July 2027. It's also published by University of New Mexico Press. So I'm excited about that. And we'll have hopefully some launch events in Alaska and elsewhere. The writing, I have been working with my dreams. So I write and draw my dreams every morning, no matter what, even if I'm hunting and
Mm.
have to get up an hour or two earlier, which is already crazy early. But they are my guide. They're sort of like that subterranean animal intuitive guide. Um, and then when I first started hunting, Al has all kinds of books. He's read everything there is around hunting, shooting, places, stories, you name it. He's got this amazing library. And he had this book called All the Powerful Invisible Things, a Sportswoman's Notebook by Gretchen Legler. And he
Mm.
said, Christy, you might like this. So I read Gretchen Legler's book at the time, and this was, oh, I don't know, 20, however many years ago. And I was so struck by her experiences, because she talks about hunting with her then partner and her father, and she was a relatively new hunter. And a lot of what she described was what I was similar to my own experiences. And somehow, I don't know, there was something in reading her and her style that kind of propelled me to, I just started writing. It wasn't like I said, I'm going to write a book or I'm going to write an essay. It was more just, like I said, metabolizing the experiences. And it did feel compulsive. It felt as necessary as butchering the animal and putting the animal in the freezer or whatever and sharing. It was like, this is a part of the process, is I must write
Mhm.
about it. I didn't know that I was going to make those stories or make it public. It was more just for my own
Yeah.
sake. But since then, actually, this is interesting. I won't go into all the details, but Gretchen Legler and I have since become friends. She actually
Oh,
came to
wow.
my house with her partner Ruth a couple of years ago, had breakfast. We had the last bit of meat from Moonlight Elk. And then last year, I got to be with her in Maine, and we did a book reading together in Rockland, Maine. And we're in touch, and I just can't believe it. She's an
Yeah,
incredible person. Yeah.
that's really neat that it came all the way around like that. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, for me, I've always written down after I get home from a hunt or a fishing trip, I'll write, but it's like fishing in particular is very utilitarian. It's like started fishing at this time, the bite came on at this time, harvested this amount of fish, the moon phase was this. It's more like something that could be used down the road. On the hunting trips, I'm a little more detailed of the experience and what happened and where specifically I was at. And my mindset has always been if my kids want to recreate those experiences for themselves down the road, they'll have a roadmap to get started with, type of thing was my motivation behind it. But I think that's a very curious thing to ask an author for anyone listening is like, why are you doing this? Because you are sharing very personal things, but you're also connecting an audience of readers to your life, really, in many aspects of it. And I think you do a really good job in your writing style of connecting people to you. Your book draws people in to wanting to know more. And
Mhm.
I don't know how intentional that is or if it's just how it worked out, because it definitely has that impact. Like I would get, it's like I told you, I don't like to just read a book like immediately. I like to do like two chapters and really absorb those two chapters, and then I'll go back and do another couple chapters. And that's how I read your book. And from, what I recall, it's like it would really draw me in and I was excited to read the next section, you know?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, thank you. No, I don't I don't know how to say it. People ask if I write fiction, and there's no way I could write fiction. I couldn't make anything up if I tried. And when I'm telling the story or writing the story, I guess for me to write it, it's necessary for me to recall every moment as explicitly as I can, because I'm placing myself there again and
mhm,
hopefully placing the reader. But there is that, it's such an exquisite experience and sensory, the vivid sensory experience of being out there that um, where I can't be anywhere else. And I guess something that I would aspire to do in the writing is to bring the reader there with me, because like I said to someone, I want the book, although I'm in it, and the press calls it a memoir. I did not intend for it to be a memoir. I don't think it's about me. It's the lens of me and through my experience, but
mhm,
it's absolutely for and about the animals. And
mhm,
if I can in any way open any reader's hearts to the animals and their habitats, that's all I want to do.
mhm.
It's not getting to know me. I'm not that interesting, but you know, you watch an elk or listen to an elk or have one come within 2 feet of you, and for a reader to experience that, especially like you say, people who aren't hunting or maybe aren't out there in those ways, for them to be able to feel that and access that through the pages, I would love to be able to offer that. That's like my
Mhm.
highest aspiration.
Yeah, you do a good job at it because you can, just the description of yourself as you're walking somewhere, or like, I can't remember I wish I could give you exact lines that I remember, but it's just like, I don't know. I just remember feeling like I was there with you in the moment and I could visualize the things you were describing, and that was the fun part for me because it was just really easy for me to go there with you and the various things you were describing. So that's not easy to do, I don't think. I mean, maybe it comes naturally for you, but I don't know that it is for a lot of people to get at that level of description where you can put the reader in that spot, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I wonder about that. Like, because I do think about, or now when I look at it, because I finish the book and then it comes out a year later and then I'm doing something else. But now, like
mhm,
if I read excerpts at an event or something and I think, oh, right, that happened, or I do wonder what other hunters, like if they'll say, well, she was using what green bullet, or she was, like all those kinds of details, or
uh,
what kind of shoes, or the wind shifted, or this, the craziest things happen out there too. It's like you can't believe some of the run-ins and so on. And so describing those, I am curious, like who else has had similar experiences. And again, it's just sharing. I'm not trying to say, and in the book, as you know, I share all kinds of mistakes I make and
mhm,
choices that I'm not proud of. And I don't know, I feel like that's part of being vulnerable, part of being human, that
mhm,
breaks down hopefully some sort of barrier or facade of perfection or expertise or right or wrong. I just don't,
Mm.
it's not that interesting to me.
Right. Well, you're
So,
just being real. It's the real, and I think the real authentic stuff is what resonates with people. At least for me. Like I don't need perfection and I don't need to hear about, how great someone is at doing something. I'd rather hear what their real experiences were because we're all learning, everybody out in this space. I did want to pick your brain a little bit. This will be kind of shifting gears a little bit, but I know you're in New Mexico and they have that, it's an oryx hunt,
yeah.
that you can, and there's like the on base and off base hunt. And a few of my friends have done that and they've only done the off base hunt and they were able to, one was able to harvest one last year and I haven't tried any of it, but he said it's really delicious meat. They're a very difficult animal to hunt. And I'm not one of those people that would want to go to a safari or like a game ranch or something like that. And that it is an exotic African animal that was brought over, I want to say in the 50s or 60s or something.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
but now it's a native like population that has grown up and been there for I don't know how long now, but it's kind of a neat concept, to go hunt that in my mind. Have you
Yeah,
have you had that experience?
I have. I put in every year when I put in for the draw, the public land draw through Game and Fish. I put in for oryx, elk, everything. And that year I did draw for oryx off range. So it's the White Sands Missile Range. So
Hmm.
there's off range, off on range. The off range hunts, when you draw, you have a whole month to hunt and harvest because it's more challenging than on range. On range, there are different parts of the range, but they're, I think, 3 day hunts, 2 or 3 day hunts, and the
Hmm.
density there and the success rate is much higher. So that's why there's a shorter amount of time. There's also more kind of regulation and oversight because you're on the range. But I had a hunt in February 2013, I think it was. And Al was with me, and we would go on the weekends because we were working. And that's down by Truth or Consequences. It's totally different habitat. Incredible landscape, amazing animal. Like you say, difficult to hunt, a lot of glassing, a lot of long range glassing. Um, and I did harvest. This was interesting. Talk about trophies. So I think the day one of when we first went, right away we saw 2 oryx. And Al said, get out, and he had made these standing shooting sticks for me. And I said to him without thinking, I said, well, they don't have horns. I think maybe one had a broken horn, the other one didn't. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? Like he couldn't believe me because I've always been hunting for meat. And that was
Hmm.
a split second moment where I thought, well, if I get this chance to hunt this beautiful exotic animal, geez, shouldn't I be looking for horns? So it was an interesting hunt for me to be toggling between that. And ultimately, it didn't matter. It was like, oh, right. There's such a rarity and the opportunity
Hmm.
to actually be in the right place and the right time to take a shot. And I think it was the third weekend we went down that it was almost the end of the day. We're heading down to Truth or Consequences to where we're going to stay for a night. And this young bull ran across the road in front of us. And I got out and it all kind of came together. But I have his skull hanging in the living room. He has these tiny little nubs. But yes, I fleshed his hide. I have his whole hide, have his
Hmm.
jaw, his skull, and the meat was delicious. It was
Yeah,
absolutely
I've heard it's phenomenal from
phenomenal.
those guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
Yeah,
don't know
it's in your backyard, so I just wanted to pick your brain about it, So,
and that's part of it. I feel the same. Like I don't really want to go on exotic hunts. Oh, like how I hunt is how I connect to home. Like hunt,
mhm.
where I'm fishing salmon, or if I get to hunt in Alaska or hunt here, it's about becoming closer to home and closer to myself because there's all the observation and that experience, right, of the habitat, the weather, what's happening in each location. And I like that deepening of connection that way. And yes, oryx is another species that we can hunt here. So I tried. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a neat opportunity that you have there. And because it's a native population, that's what appeals to me rather than like a high fence, because a lot of times people are hunting those in Texas or something on a high fence thing. And this is a
Yeah.
wild, very difficult animal to hunt from what I understand. Like they're usually a long distance, they run really quick. They're a very strong animal.
Yeah.
Um, But that reminded me as you were sharing that story of that part in the book where you talk about the whitetail hunt that you go on like a family setting, like a family property or something, and how you were struggling with, yes, you were bringing home meat, but it
Mm,
was this, and you knew, like, I can't remember if it was a sister-in-law or a cousin that had said,
cousin.
hey, it was cousin, and it was like, hey, if you come here, you're going to get an animal. Like, it's not a question of if, it's you definitely will. And at the time in your life, you were wanting that meat for the freezer, but then you were kind of dealing with these emotions of like going out to like a cornfield or a pasture grass where it's been sprayed and all these different chemicals are on the ground, and then you're getting this animal that you're wanting to be this version that you're used to, and you're getting this other version of it potentially.
Mm,
So as you were sharing that, that kind of and to your point, that whole connection to home and deepening the home connection, that type of a hunt isn't doing that. That's not filling that need for you. Yeah, you're filling the freezer, but you're not filling that void that you're feeling in your daily life, you know?
yeah.
So it reminded
Yeah,
me of that story. But
that one was that I hadn't, I think I had an elk hunt, but I didn't bring home an elk that fall. And my
mhm,
cousin and her husband and kids have a place in Texas, in Comanche, and they said, "We'll come hunt whitetail." And they actually have too many on their land to be able to sustain the population. So they have corn feeders and a blind. And
mhm,
my cousin said, "Yeah," and I take my camo, I'm all ready to go actually hunt. He said, "Well, you could just wear tennis shoes and jeans." And so it was. I did shoot 4 deer and I brought them home, processed them. I drove my Prius. It was very odd. It was an odd experience, and there were a lot of questions. And I do have to say, although it wasn't hunting, I do feel better about bringing home that meat and processing that animal and touching the animal's bodies than buying an anonymous
mhm.
form of meat from the store. I still feel
Yeah.
better about it. It's not the same, but I feel better about it.
Yeah, and you're harvesting. That's what I harvested a deer on my own property one time with my son, and it was when he was getting into the idea of hunting. And I said, we live in a semi-rural area. We only own 10 acres, and told him, do you want to try to hunt on our property? But I want you to understand, this isn't normal hunting. This is just exposing you to that process of taking an animal's life, taking it through the process, processing the meat, all that. And it's different. It's a harvest, and you still celebrate the animal and you celebrate that harvest, but it's not a true hunting experience, if you will, you know.
Mhm.
But that
Yeah,
doesn't make it bad. And to your point, I
no.
would much rather eat that than most of the things I could buy at the grocery store.
Yeah, or even domestic raised animals. A lot of people ask me that. Why don't you raise chickens or raise your own? This one time I was sharing that I had hunted quail, and a person was horrified. She says, "Why don't you just raise chickens?" And to me, it's interesting too. It's like, well, that reflects to me human valuing of life. Like which life is more valuable, a domestic chicken or a quail? And can we quantify that? And who's to say? And
Mhm.
again, I'm not saying like I think that year maybe I shot 2 quail, not that many, but they're extremely valuable. And I have raised chickens and butchered chickens, and my family they raise cattle, and I don't know. To me, even that is one step closer to connection than
Mhm.
an anonymous purchase. And also, I think people are doing the best they can, and very few people have access to hunting or to raising domestic animals, and they do buy their food primarily from the grocery store, and that's the way our world is, and that's okay. I don't think they're
Mhm.
wrong. I don't really want to be judged for what I'm doing, and I don't want to judge them.
Exactly. I think
Um,
that's a beautifully said phrase because we have a debate in Oregon over cougars because the cougar population has really expanded, and they were trying to get it on the ballot, and I don't think that it made it, but we banned hunting with dogs in 1994 for cougar and bear. And so our cougar population has exploded since then. And obviously, these hound hunters that had a family heritage of hunting with hounds have now lost the ability to do that. And most of them have, either passed away or moved on from hound hunting. And so we as voters, there was a lot of propaganda around that measure when it passed, and there was videos of these, people shooting mama bears out of trees and things like that. It was very, and they weren't even filmed in Oregon. It was very manipulated at the time, and the
yeah.
voters just saw a cruelty to animal type of situation, and we put that bill in place, and now we have a cougar population that's high enough that's impacting our mule deer population, and it's the number one threat to mule deer, and most, true people that'll talk the real conversations opinion. And so there was talk of getting it back on the ballot to, allow each county to determine if they were going to allow hound hunting or not, and
Deal.
letting it be at a county level. But what I appreciate about what you just said is my friend Chris, who has also read most of your book, I don't know if he's totally done yet, but he went to the talks, and there was folks on both sides of the conversation talking about it. And it's nice to be able to talk about things and say that there's not a right or wrong answer. I just don't want you to tell me what I can do, you know? And that's the same thing, in my opinion, with the hound hunting. If you want your county and you vote in that direction and you believe that you should be able to not allow that, then that's up to you. But in this particular county where they're eating, cattle, and they're devastating the mule deer population, we're going to use some dogs to thin down that population, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think if we had a little bit more of that, the world would be a whole lot better place. Willingness to kind of let everybody have their own opinion and be okay with it. But,
And at the very least, listen. At the very
mhm,
least, listen and try to empathize and understand, because I don't really know unless I've tried it myself, whatever it is, or I know more about the reasons behind it, the history, the ecological context, or whatever. And it's tricky. I think it takes a lot of time and responsibility to do all kinds of research to understand the various sides of any subject, regardless of what it is, hunting or anything else. And speaking for myself, I rarely do in-depth research. I have strong feelings and opinions, but I'm definitely open to be proven wrong, and definitely open to being enlightened from another side. And some things I probably just will not understand and I won't agree with, but I at least want to be open to listening and respecting. And I
yeah,
ask that in return, like you can, at least respect my experience and my thoughts and feelings, and I'll do the same, whether or not you agree. And yeah, I think right now we're in such divisive times that I think we need just, if we can be quiet and listen a little more,
yeah,
we might be better off.
yeah. And we forget the humanity, that there's a humanity in every aspect of life, and no matter what someone's viewpoint is, most people are coming to a viewpoint from a place of that's their worldview, or they have some sort of identity invested in that. And I think if we can, because Chris went to that hearing and he said, I didn't agree with the other side that was saying, we should keep it the way that it is. And they were explaining why, and they were putting, human characteristics on cougars, and, until they eat their dog, they're going to maybe believe that way. But he said, I did appreciate that they were still really passionate about it, that they had a passion,
Mhm.
and whether I agreed with it or not, I had to respect the passion. Not to get too political, but we have a proposed measure that's probably going to make the ballot in November, and it's IP 28 here in Oregon. I don't know if you've heard about it, but essentially it would ban all harvesting of animals, hunting, fishing, and even farming for, cattle and sheep, and you couldn't even kill a mouse in your house, if this passed. Um, we know it's probably not going to pass, but it's probably going to make the ballot. But the one thing I will say to the main person that proposed it, main petitioner, I guess, is I've heard a couple interviews from him, and he's willing to talk to naysayers. I mean, even though I definitely don't agree with his opinion, I appreciate the fact that he's willing to throw himself out there and explain his viewpoint. I think the challenge, and the reason they're getting so many signatures to get on the ballot, is they're saying, "Are you against animal cruelty? Sign here." And they're not really
Oh,
diving into what
yeah.
the measure would do, which would make it illegal to do all those things. So it would,
Oh. Mm.
obviously, I don't think it's going to pass, but it is scary that potentially someone could take that part of our life away from us. You know,
It is. This sounds so extreme.
it is, yeah.
So
And
extreme.
part
Huh.
part of it is that shocking of the system is you start super
Yeah.
extreme and then you go to something less extreme,
Yeah.
when that fails, and then people are, well, it's not as bad as it could have been, But
Mhm.
again, I think we really, to your point, need to listen and listen to the why people. The first episode we did on this podcast was Why We Hunt, was what we called it. And we've changed a lot since then. And we were pretty amateur in how we talked and the things we talked about, but it was still trying to express to people the reasoning behind why we hunted. And I did have some friends that had said that, they're not hunters, and they reached out and they always were curious, and it helped them understand and actually appreciate why we hunt rather
Yeah.
than just kind of judging that it was for these other reasons that they had no idea about,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There are a lot of stereotypes for sure. A lot of views and ideas of what a hunter is, as if there's only one kind, too. I
yeah.
mean, there's so many different kinds of hunters, just like any other group, different kinds of golfers, like your daughter.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah. I
know?
just got back from 2 days of golfing, so it's yeah, you're right. There's no right or wrong way of doing things. I mean, there are certain things that we all want to, like. I want to be a better shot. I want to be the most ethical version of a hunter that I can be. But I don't know if you've listened to many of our episodes, but I miss shots. I take rush shots, and no matter, and actually, I feel like I'm getting worse. Like I'm spending
Oh,
more time at the range, and like
mhm,
I know that I'm more accurate, but
mhm,
in the field, and
mhm,
I have made some bad decisions, fairly
mhm,
lately, and I'm trying to continue to improve that. I mean, I'm usually taking an animal with one bullet, but there's still times where I just make the wrong decision in the wrong. To your point, you're maturing in the right way, and that you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to pull the trigger this time, and that is the absolute right answer, I think.
mhm,
Oftentimes, I think we're so, at least myself, that I
mhm.
want to harvest and I want to bring home the meat, and that I'll take a bad shot sometimes. You know,
Yeah, no, we all
so
do. I've definitely done that too. There's a lot of pressure, and it's that split second. And then when we rewind and go over it and over and over it, every detail, we can identify like if I had changed in that moment, or if I had waited another second, or shifted to the right, or whatever. Like
mhm.
anything in life, hindsight, of course, we can see clearly.
But you'd almost rather miss the opportunity and not take an errant shot, to your point. Like I had an opportunity a couple of years back where a deer, had he turned left, would have been an easy harvest. And it was in between this narrow opening in between trees. If he turned
Mm,
right, he was clear to spend the rest of his time away from me. And he came up and he did take the right hand turn, and I didn't take the shot. But when I think of that memory, it was like, okay, that was the right decision in the moment, rather than trying to shoot through some tree limbs or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And different people have different abilities. I think about it all the time. Like some shots that I haven't taken that I know for like Al, for example, he could have done that 10 times over with no problem. And that's
mhm.
okay. And I'm glad I know that because I don't want to act like I have some other skill that I don't and then have a
Yeah,
disaster. I mean, my biggest fear is wounding an animal and not finding them or, you know,
yeah,
I don't want to do that.
yeah, definitely
So
not. So if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? And can you hold up the book for us so that
yeah,
they can see that?
can you see okay? This
Yeah.
is Moonlight Elk, One Woman's Hunt for Food and Freedom. It is published by the University of New Mexico Press, and you can find it wherever you buy your books. Also, it's an audiobook form, and you can connect with me at christiegreen.net. I'd love to hear from anybody anytime. You can send me an email or whatever. And Salmon Dreaming will be out next year, and then there's another book coming 2 years after that. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sam.
Yeah, it's been my privilege to spend some time with you and get to know you better. And I really am grateful for your willingness to be patient with me, because I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, and I'm glad that we finally were able to connect and get to chat with each other for a little bit. And
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see the new book when it comes out as well. And when I get my hands back on the physical copy of your book, I am going to read it again, because that's the kind of brain that I have. I need to read it several times for it to really absorb. But I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the storytelling and how you kind of connected and interwove pieces of your life with the outdoor experience, and like I've talked, just the descriptive nature of how you really go in depth and describe things to put that reader in those situations with you. So I felt like I knew you before we started talking, but
Yeah.
it's been great to actually hear your voice instead of read it on a page. So
Yeah. No, it's so
but
good to spend time with you and thank you for sharing Moonlight Elk with your listeners. And always curious about people's experiences and stories. So anything anybody wants to share, I'm open. Yeah.
Are you out there on like Instagram and those types of things as well?
Yep, I'm on Instagram at Christie Nell Designs and also Radical Landscape, Radicle. That's the name of my landscape architecture business. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook just with my name. But all of
Okay.
that is on christiegreen.net. So you can just look up
Oh,
my
it
name.
connects you to everything. Okay, and it's Christy with an IE if you're having trouble finding her. She's a,
Yeah, and green
but if
like the
you,
color.
yeah,
Green
that
like the
that
color.
part's easy,
That's
right?
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, thank you so much again for being here and for being patient with me. So,
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. All
thank
the
you.
right time. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I was just going to stop recording so we could just